Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, it is our weekly show with Cole Zwicker from over at the Stepien. You guys know him as an NBA scout extraordinaire, I would say, right, Cole?
Man, I'm blushing now. That's a hell of an introduction.
I'm not sure you're blushing as much as Jason Tatum was when he got denied from Warwick out here in Hollywood last night, but nonetheless, I think that it's okay to give you a little bit of that red face. Before we get into this, we're going to have a couple of topics here. We're going to talk about Zion Williamson committing to Duke and just generally where we are with him. He's obviously a very polarizing prospect as a player. I don't really give all that big of a shit about him going to Duke, but I do think that it presents a couple of interesting talking points just from a roster fit perspective. So we're going to go into that, and then we're going to talk about the top 100 list that I released earlier today on The Athletic. A couple of big moves there. I have Deandre Ayton at number 1 now. I've got Chandler Hutchison as a lottery pick, which I still kind of don't believe, but that's a thing that I have now. Our sponsor today is going to be RX Bar, as it was on Tuesday when we last podcasted. But Cole, how's it going, man? That was a long intro.
No, it's going well. This is a fun time of year. We got the NBA trade deadline coming up, one of my favorite days of the year overall. Not a huge all-star guy, but I think the college picks are starting to come into some clarity, getting into conference play. So it's a fun time.
Yeah, there's that. There's the fact that, All-Star is going to be out here in my neck of the woods in 3 weeks or something like that. Trade deadline is in 2 weeks, correct?
I believe so. Yeah, 2 weeks from today.
So it's a really, really good time. We're going to talk trade deadline stuff, and we're going to talk All-Star stuff because the teams just got selected right before we're recording this podcast. I'll do that probably on a separate podcast with somebody else because I think we have a few different interesting talking points here that we want to hit. And if we talk about All-Stars, it'll just get way, way too long and way too into the weeds given the draft that just happened. So we're going to start with Zion Williamson. So Zion Williamson commits to Duke. It was seen as a pretty big shocker throughout the industry. I don't know. How much do you kind of look into the recruiting scene, Cole? I'm not really sure.
A little bit. I follow Andrew Slater, guys like that, and I believe everybody thought it was Clemson, right? So it was kind of out of left field when he went Duke.
It was one of those cases where a lot of people that I had spoken with, like off the record, kind of had thought it was Clemson, both people who work in basketball and people who cover basketball. They thought it was Clemson, but they didn't know either. It was one of those kind of situations where there did seem to be a bit of uncertainty, although there was they felt like it was a likelihood he would go to Clemson, kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like many things whenever you're talking about someone who tries to keep his decisions and decision-making processes as personal as he can, right? That's totally cool. If I was Zion Williamson, I would hope that nobody really knew what my thought process was going to be going into it. So he ends up committing to Duke. That gives Duke now RJ Barrett, Cameron Reddish, and Zion Williamson. Those three are the top 3 players consensus according to 247sports.com with their algorithm where they kind of take all of the rankings across the internet and average them together and come to some sort of consensus. So he is the composite number 3 player. What do you think of his game overall before we get into the fit with Duke?
Well, obviously he's enormous, and his kind of locomotive status in transition especially, he reminds me of a more athletic Julius Randle. When he gets the ball in the open court, it's get the hell out of the way because he's just getting to the rim every time. I've only seen a couple of AAU games, and you can't judge too much off that just because he'll kind of stand a foul line extended defensively, just not really give a damn, and then wait for the ball in offense, and he'll just get to the rim. So, I think the thing you can judge is his build and speed kind of with the ball as a ball handler is a plus. I don't know how that translates to the NBA or even to college really in certain roles. I really do hope he plays small ball 5, but I've kind of given up any kind of expectations when it comes to Duke. He'll probably spot up from the corner or something, but he's going to be a player. I think that kind of athleticism and build combined with the ball handling, you just don't see in a lot of guys.
Yeah, for his weight, I can't imagine that there is a more athletic human being that has played college basketball within the last 5 years, right? At least within the last decade, maybe. He's 270 pounds and he's 6'6", not overly long. I want to say he has like a +4 wingspan, thereabouts. But he is just the most explosive dude that you will find on a basketball floor. He would stand up explosively to guys like, I mean, I don't know if he's Zach LaVine in terms of explosiveness, because LaVine has his own special like thing where he looks like he's floating, whereas Zion looks like, you know, a bomb that's about to go off in the air, right? He's one of those guys, though, where you can talk about him genuinely winning a dunk contest one day. That's why he is such an incredibly highly regarded prospect, right? I mean, people have seen these dunks. It's why he's so famous now. It's why Drake has a Zion Williamson jersey. People see the mixtapes and the highlight reels, and it's just, it's unbelievable to watch. When he's at his best, he's kind of a freak that athletically I can't remember seeing in basketball. Can you remember someone like him?
No, I can't, honestly. I mean, he's mesmerizing to watch play.
He's
all the
unique.
athleticism. He's unique. Yeah, I thought Deandre Ayton was unique this year as far as just watching him run the floor at that size, kind of David Robinson-esque, which was before my time. But damn, I mean, Williamson adds that kind of explosive factor for his height and just how big he is. I don't know how he really fits into organized basketball yet, but just in theory, as an athlete and build-wise, it's a phenomenal combination.
So in terms of skill set, I kind of want to just jump into this. He is a really, really good rebounder for his size, 6'6". He is a good ball handler for his size. He can grab and go on the break. He's a pretty good passer. I don't think he's like an elite passer, but I think he's a pretty good passer for his size. Good first step, obviously, going with the explosiveness, but he's a guy. So Cole, I know that you like to archetype guys, right? You like to have positional archetypes or skill set archetypes, right?
Yeah.
He's a guy that doesn't fit into any sort of archetype. Would you say that's fair?
From what I've seen, absolutely fair.
So, you know, he's a guy that doesn't shoot the ball really outside of 15 feet. And I've seen Zion, I think, 5 or 6 times live, and I've seen quite a bit of his games on film at this stage. He is someone who I think has been able to get to the rim so often throughout the course of his career, be it in transition or be it in half-court settings, that some of his shooting skills and some of his, you know, the finer points of his footwork and mechanics haven't been developed yet because they haven't had to be developed yet. And that scares me a little bit, as well as the fact that, you know, he is 272 pounds already. Like, weight is going to be an issue, I think. Like, he needs to make sure he keeps his weight under control, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It has to be good weight. I mean, he has to be able to retain his explosiveness, his mobility. Just from what you've described, though, I kind of have a thought of him just being a small ball 5 in the NBA certain times. I mean, he might start at the 4, but like utilizing him a lot at the 5 to really capture that agility advantage, the explosiveness advantage, the athleticism advantage would just be huge.
So I think that this is where we should get into fit concerns, right? Because, so he's going to be at Duke, and we'll talk about the Duke situation in a minute here, but like in the NBA, he's going to have to play either the 4 or the 5, given where his skill set is on the perimeter right now as a shooter. And I don't know that he necessarily has the first step to get by wing athletes consistently. I think he's probably going to have to play the 4 or the 5 in the NBA. And when you pair him next to somebody, you're going to have someone who can shoot and who can protect the rim. Like, if you put him next to Kristaps Porzingis in New York, I think that he could become an all-star. Like, he would just be able to rim run and rebound and kind of fill every single little thing that Kristaps doesn't do well. If you put him next to let's say a Mohamed Bamba, I think there are going to be real offensive issues there, even though Bamba fits one of the skill archetypes that you need to put next to him as a rim protector. If you would put him next to a Marvin Bagley, I don't know that there'd be enough rim protection there. He's going to be a player that is so incredibly determined. His long-term outlook is going to be so incredibly determined by who he plays with that I don't really know yet what to think of him, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, a team that drafts high this year and takes like a Jaren Jackson conceivably could draft, you know, Zion next year, and that would be another great fit. I think we're getting at the same point is you need a specifically tailored fit if you're going to probably compete at the highest levels of play. I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams that just take him and like, we're just going to play him at the 5 and see what happens because he can anchor. I mean, he has the girth, and that's something you look for. He can box guys out. He has that physicality, but that only takes you so far as actually winning games without that rim protection dynamic. I don't know what he is there. I mean, obviously he doesn't have the measurables to really be imposing. Did he show any kind of tendencies as like a weak side shot blocker? I'm assuming he has the explosiveness to like protect the rim from the weak side at least.
Yeah, he does it, but he does it whenever he can chase blocks. You know what I mean?
Okay, got it.
Like he's not a guy that I've seen. I mean, he does it well, I think is the way to put it. But he does it well for a kid that's 6'6".
Yeah, I think that what you're getting at as the ceiling is kind of, it's not there as a team construct if he's not paired with a guy like Porzingis. I mean, that's the one that really jumps off the page as far as his fit at the next level. But if you can really optimize him, he's someone that is probably going to get knocked a lot because he's not that diverse. He's not that versatile fitting into lineups. But he's a guy that if you can optimize, you could really extract that value.
So I just kind of did a quick search for players who have, over the last 3 or 4 years, had at least 1 3 and 1 block per game. Because I think that's basically, or 1.5 blocks per game. Because I think that's basically the baseline for what you need to pair with him, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Conceptual, yes.
So over the course of those years, Karl Anthony Towns did it is doing it this year. Kevin Durant is doing it this year. DeMarcus Cousins and Kristaps Porzingis are doing it this year. I think the Cousins fit would be problematic for quite a few different reasons defensively. But the rest of those other 3, I think, would make sense. Serge Ibaka and Brook Lopez did it the year before. Brook Lopez kind of not a disaster fit there. I mean, like, I don't know if Brook Lopez is a starter anymore, but just his ability to shoot, I think, would help. Joel Embiid did it last year as well. Embiid, I think, would be a really good fit because Embiid is a good fit with everyone, but Zion Williamson would not be a good fit with Ben Simmons, so that makes it a little bit trickier. Serge Ibaka, I think, is like the archetype of this player, but I don't think Toronto is going to be in position to take Zion Williamson. I mean, maybe they will be. Maybe his issues will come to fruition. But I think that's the kind of player you need. You need it to be like a Miles Turner, a Kristaps Porzingis, a Karl Towns, or, a Kevin Durant next to him. And there aren't a ton of players like that. Even though we're entering this era of pace and space and the modern big man, we haven't hit the point of saturation yet to where a player like Zion is going to be a fit immediately.
Like 3-and-D bigs that protect the rim and shoot threes, those aren't like there's not a lot of those guys. I mean, they're not in high demand because there's not the personnel right now. That's why a guy like Jaren Jackson in this class again stands out as a guy who can potentially do that. I mean, you can't profile and like anticipate that you're going to be able to be in position to take both of those guys, a guy like Jackson and then Zion, but that's kind of the roster construction and intent that has to go behind that pairing, is someone who can conceptually protect the rim, shoot threes, maybe provide some playmaking, and just unleash Zion in certain matchups.
Yeah, and when you're that athletic and he plays relatively hard when he's attacking the ball. Particularly, he plays really hard when he's attacking the ball. Defensively, he'll come and go sometimes. But to me, he needs to really just have a motor. Like, he needs to be going 100% all the time. And I think he can be really successful if he does that. But there's more to it than just saying this guy is the best athlete that we've ever seen and he's the number 3 prospect in this class. He's like this surefire one-and-done elite prospect. Like, if he was in the 2017 class, I'm just going to start reading names. Marvin Bagley, Michael Porter, Mohamed Bamba, DeAndre Ayton, Colin Sexton, Wendell Carter, Jaren Jackson. Would you take him over any of those guys?
I have not seen enough of him. I can't really judge a player until I see more of a specific environment in college. So how does that athleticism, how does that apply functionally to a basketball game? The instincts and stuff, I just don't have a good enough read on him. If we're just talking in a vacuum, it's just so tough because this class is so loaded. I probably wouldn't take him in the top 5 of this class, honestly, just based on what I've seen, unless I see more specifics. I'm not ruling him out at all. I just don't have a good enough opinion yet to be as high on him as I am on some of these other guys.
Right, and I would agree with you as someone who has not seen, or who has seen a pretty good amount of him at this stage. Not like, I haven't seen as much as Evan Daniels has or Eric Bossi has, but I've seen him enough to where I can come away with a pretty strong opinion on him. And this isn't to say he's not like a 5-star prospect. This isn't to say he's not a really, really good basketball player. He's going to be awesome. He's going to probably average 15 and 10 next year pretty easily, I think. And I think that we should talk about Duke really quickly because, Duke now has RJ Barrett, Cameron Reddish, and Zion Williamson. There's been concern about how all of these pieces fit together. I would say that if I was running the team, which I'm not, I mean, thank God for Duke that I'm not running the team, but like, if it was me, I would just have no problem running those 3 guys out there as my front court. Like, RJ can shoot, Cam is becoming a more consistent shooter, and Zion is just going to be the motor guy who goes and grabs everything up off the glass and hopefully can protect the rim and anchor a little bit. Like, I would just run super small and try and run teams off the floor with them and Trey Jones.
That's what I'd do, too. I mean, it starts with playing Zion at the 5 for me and then building your way down, trying to get as much shooting as possible on the court. I'm not sure if Gary Trent stays or not, but he obviously adds the floor spacing dynamic. I think they could be almost impossible to guard in a college setting if they play it right. Like, I don't know how you stop that team with those amount of creators. RJ on the perimeter, he can run pick and roll. Zion is going to have a mismatch against any college big for the most part, agility-wise. If Coach K wants to blow teams out of the water, that's definitely the lineup I'd go to.
The question there is, though, obviously, will he play Zion as a 5? Will he play RJ as a 2 and Cam Reddish as a 3? Like, if he plays a lineup with Barrett, Reddish, Williamson, and Bolden, I'm going to be upset.
Oh, I'm already upset. Like, it's going to happen.
That's not going to go well, I don't think. And I don't know if Marquise Bolden's going to stay there. I don't know if he's, what's going on with him right now. He's been missing some games recently with injury. So it's hard to tell, like, where his place is realistically in their rotation. But, I would imagine that he would either want to play or he would want to go elsewhere. So did Coach K promise Zion Williamson that he'll play the 3 and the 4 a little bit? Did he promise Cam Reddish that he'll play the 3 a little bit? All of this is still so up for debate that we don't know how it's actually going to work and how it actually comes to fruition. In terms of a theoretical fit, though, Zion to me should be playing the 5 on that team. And if he does, I think it's going to be awesome, and I think they're going to run teams off the court. If he doesn't, and he thinks for whatever reason that it's best for his development that he plays the 4 and Cam plays the 3, and he thinks playing the 3 is best for his development, that's where things get tricky for me. I don't know.
Yeah, and we're assuming that Duval comes out in this class. If he stays and he's the point guard, if he's a starting point guard, that's going to even reduce spacing even more. Like if you play Bolden with Zion, then that's a kind of a disaster recipe.
I mean, I think that Trey Jones is probably going to be their point guard next year, just kind of regardless. Like, it's the same deal. We'll talk about this a little bit later on, like with Hamidou Diallo. Like, Hamidou Diallo is falling on both of our boards and falling, I think, on just about every board at this stage. But if I was him, I'd probably leave anyway because Keldon Johnson is coming in next year, and I think Keldon Johnson is really good. It's a tricky spot for Trey Duval, I think, to where if I was Trey, I would probably go because Trey Jones is coming in.
I totally agree with you. I just don't know if he will decide that, but I think that's probably the right decision.
Yeah, no, it's a weird situation, I think. Before we move into the next talking point, though, I want to talk to you about RX Bar. RX Bar is a whole food protein bar. Their bars are made with 100% whole ingredients. They want to be transparent and upfront with their customers, which is why they label the core ingredients on the packaging and the ingredients that make up the texture and taste on the back. Beyond being a go-to snack that checks off a number of nutritional boxes, RX bars actually taste great. They found creating a bar from real whole food ingredients actually tastes better than anything else out there. They don't need fillers, additives, chemicals, or added sugar. They just started calling BS on protein bars. They couldn't find a protein bar out there that wasn't full of artificial ingredients, fillers, preservatives, all of that BS that people don't want from their protein bars. They set out to create a bar with a few simple, clean ingredients where every ingredient serves a purpose. RX Bar's core ingredients do all of the talking. It's simply like eating 3 egg whites, 2 dates, and 6 almonds with no BS. It turns out that whole food ingredients actually taste great. You can really taste the cacao, the real fruit, the spices. Whether you like sweet or savory, chocolate or fruit flavors, there's an RX bar for you. They come in 11 delicious flavor varieties. They're gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free with no added sugar, no artificial colors, no artificial flavors, preservatives, or fillers. The protein comes from egg whites. Dates are there to bind. The nuts are there for texture. They taste absolutely great. They sent me a box of them, and it is really, really impressive. I've really enjoyed the chocolate and sea salt ones. I've enjoyed the mint chocolate chip ones. They're absolutely excellent, especially when you're on the go and just trying to get a quick meal in, right? So here is my offer to you. For 25% off your first order, visit rxbar.com/gametheory. rxbar.com/gametheory. GAMETHEORY. You'll be taken to a page that will allow you to check out and set everything up. It will have the promo code Game Theory in the applied discount box. Just make sure it's there, though, because that's ultimately how you're going to get that discount on your first order. So again, that's for 25% off. Go to rxbar.com/Game Theory. This is just a really great product, and I've really, really enjoyed what they have sent me already. So let's go on ahead and move on and talk about the top 100 board that I released over at The Athletic this day, I guess. I did it today. This day is a really shitty way to say today. So I had Deandre Ayton at number 1. You've been someone who has been pretty stringent on your belief that Luka Doncic should be the number 1 prospect in this class. What is your overall reaction to me putting Deandre Ayton at number 1?
I mean, it's understandable. I understand why a lot of people are doing that. I think he's definitely the other guy other than Luka that people have number 1 overall. I get the upside, of course, the physical build, the movement skills, all of that is there. I still don't know about the instincts on both sides of the ball. I'm open to him showing more as far as like quick decisions, and defensively still not protecting the rim to the extent that I'd like, even though he did have that 6-block game against Stanford. I just think that Luka has a higher upside, which is what a lot of people will disagree with, just because there's so much value in being the primary offensive creator on your team. And if you think Luka is that, then I would say you should have a number 1. If you don't think Luka is that, then I very much more so understand having, someone like Ayton there.
So I think it's about what you think the risk factor is with Luka Doncic and his ability to create space against elite level players, right? Like that's what you have to believe. You have to believe that he is going to be able to consistently get separation from elite level athletes. Is there any concern there for you on whether or not he can do that?
In an isolation setting against the elite wing defenders, there's a ton of concern there for me. But the fact that he can just play and pick and roll and create in those settings, and he has the size, he has the step back shooting ability, pull up jump shot, he has enough ways, enough avenues to score where I'm not concerned about it in like a grander sense. There are going to be specific matchups, especially in the playoffs, when teams have, like the Celtics, for example, they have like 3 different wings out there and they just switch all pick and roll actions, and you get Marcus Smart on him or something like that. He's going to struggle a little bit. But overall, I just think that he brings enough as a primary guy, especially in pick and roll, that he can outlast a bunch of those shortcomings.
Yeah, I think that's totally a fair viewpoint. I mean, I have Luka at number 2 on my board for many of those reasons, right? With Ayton, the reason that I've moved him up is I think that he has been a lot better defensively as the season has gone on. It seems very clear to me that he is becoming a more effective rim protector now. He is one of about 440 players that, according to Synergy, has contested at least 25 shots at the rim this season. And he is 20th nationally among those 440 players in percentage against. He's allowing 30.6% at the rim this year. That's really good. A lot of that stuff in those numbers comes off of drives where he's just sticking with the guy and sliding his feet and opening his hips and then going up with verticality or trying to block the shot. But I think that shows in a lot of ways that his versatility defensively, I guess, the fact that he can move his feet as well as he does, really is going to go a long way toward being able to, I guess, defend multiple player types and be put out on an island in pick and roll settings and in situations where, teams rush to get the mismatch against the 7'1" center. The fact that he can actually guard out on the perimeter is really important. I will certainly admit that his weak side rotations defensively to come in and provide verticality as a rim protector, provide any sort of blocked shot, they still come a little bit late, but I think they've gotten better throughout the season. It's going to be a growth process there, though, just how it was with Karl Anthony Towns, where he still doesn't have his head on a swivel in the way that some centers do. Like Jaren Jackson, I think, innately has that in his brain. But I think you can teach that with Ayton in much the same way that we've seen it over the course of, I would say, really the last month and a half with Karl Towns, where he is learning how to do this. He's learning what it takes to be that backside help defender. I think that you put a guy with Ayton's tools and length and physicality and size there, I think he can figure it out.
For me, I agree pretty much with everything you just said. The on-ball stuff has always been good. Like, he contains well on drives and pick and roll. Like, he can stay attached to guards. He always usually contests on ball when he's like backpedaling. He's pretty good at that.
Yeah, one point I want to bring up there that I noticed while doing this, I'd actually already made the decision to put him at number 1 in large part because of the rim protection improvement. But one point I want to bring up is he is so good at opening his hips if someone tries to just blow by him, like crosses over and blows by. He's so good at doing that little drop step, opening up his hips and sliding with the guy without really missing a beat in terms of speed. Like someone like Kevin Knox, that's something that scares me with Kevin Knox. Kevin Knox struggles with that. For DeAndre Ayton to be able to do it at 7'1", 260 pounds is unheard of to me.
Yeah, exactly. The movement skills and the hip flexibility, all of that stuff is there. It's just that instincts point that you made, like the Jaren Jackson ability. I don't know if you can necessarily learn that to the extent of like being an elite level defensive player. So if you take like the elite defensive bigs over the last 5 years, they're guys like Gobert who just has a freakish natural ability, but also has pretty damn good instincts. Draymond Green's probably the best instincts guy in the league. So those guys have like that natural ability to diagnose quickly. And that's
Can I give you one name though?
Absolutely.
DeAndre Jordan did not come into the NBA with this innate ability. And, he has been a really good defender. I think that it would be unfair to say that early in his career, he was an overrated defender, I think is the way to put it. But
yeah,
by the time Doc Rivers got there and Doc started to work with him, he became an elite defender in the NBA. He's lost like a half step now out on the perimeter, but he didn't come into the NBA with that like innate sense. You look at his numbers over the course of his first couple years, he was not a great weak side protector, but he figured it out. He figured out how to be the quarterback in the back of the defense.
And that goes to my second point that I was going to make, was that situation is huge with him. Like if he goes to a situation where I'm comfortable with the coaching improving those elements of his game, I could completely understand having him number 1 overall. I'm just a little bit more hesitant just because I get the natural movement skills. And he's not a bad defensive player. I think he's pretty solid in space, like we noted. It's just the instinct stuff, he's still late to diagnose. And I don't know if that ever comes to you. Some guys just have those instincts where they rotate over. They have the motor where they don't like quit on plays. You'll still see Ayton. He'll just hang out around the foul line. He won't crash down to box out sometimes. There are areas in his game. I don't think he has a bad motor. I know he got that rep coming into the league. I think, honestly, he's been pretty decent there this year. But there are still some plays that it just doesn't look like it's there mentally. There's no physical limitation for me. It's more just how high and how consistent is he going to be as a defensive player. We see a lot of guys that are spotty defensive bigs in the league. They'll have really good seasons. They'll have really bad seasons. That might be something that Ayton does. I'm not sure if he has the consistency and that element to be the number 1 player in this specific draft. But I understand your argument.
Yeah, I mean, the other argument with Ayton, too, is, and, like you said, like, it's not like I have to make an argument here. Like, having DeAndre Ayton number 1, having Luka Doncic number 1, even, I think you could have Marvin Bagley number 1 still. You would strongly disagree with that, but that's fine. Like, there's not really a right answer to this right now. You know what I mean? There's not an answer that is so abundantly obvious that every team should have X player number 1 on their board. The thing that I do want to bring up with DeAndre Ayton, though, so right now, his numbers are just obscene. he's averaging over 19.5 points, 11 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks while shooting better than 60% from the field. No freshman has done that in the last quarter century of college basketball. There has only been one other player in high major college basketball to do that. That guy was Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan ended up being pretty good, I would say. And Tim Duncan did it as a senior at Wake Forest. So that's the kind of statistical production we're talking about from Deandre Ayton right now. It is at the highest of high levels.
It's important to keep that in context as well. There's a tendency to nitpick someone like Ayton just because he is so physically dominant, and you look at him and he's not perfect, right? Because no prospect is, but he moves like David Robinson. I mean, you think that I think you've noted many times, he was built in a lab to play basketball. And you look at a guy like that and you're like, why does he struggle in these areas? Why isn't he always like this physical? Why isn't he always rotating over for blocks? But what he's doing is still special. I think he's a really special prospect. I just want to see where he goes. I think it's really important for someone like him to see the kind of the climate he goes into, but you can definitely make an argument for him number one.
So I think the next place to probably go here is the one that raised a few eyebrows was Mohamed Bamba at 7. Some people have him as high as like number 3 on their board. I understand the appeal of that. I don't agree though. Obviously having him number 7. What was your reaction when I had him at number 7?
I think it's just generally a philosophy standpoint. I mean, I think the upside with Bamba is pretty clear. We've seen Rudy Gobert has had the best defensive season over the last 5 years for any player in the NBA. And you look at this draft and you see who has the tools, who has that ability as a rim protector, and there's one guy. It's Mohamed Bamba. Maybe Jaren Jackson, but he doesn't have the same length, not the outlier, super freaky tools that Bamba does. Yeah. But there's also a lot of room. There's a long way to go for him to be that player, is the best way to say it. Like, he has to add the requisite girth. He has to be mentally there as far as a work ethic wise. Even if you throw the shot away, the whole like 3-point shooting, maybe that happens from a stationary standpoint and like a corner 3, maybe it doesn't. But just to reach that defensive upside, I think it speaks more to him as a person. And this is someone who said before that he doesn't really like the game of basketball that much. I mean, I know he took that back, but that's the kind of psyche you have to look into when evaluating Bamba. It's like the upside is clear, but the floor is also maybe not as high as some of these other players. He's maybe less safe. And I know you factor in safety more than I do when you rank guys, especially at the top.
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone who feels pretty strongly that when you're at the top of the draft, you need to get a guy that you feel safe with. Markelle Fultz ended up not being that guy that I had at number 1 last year, but that was unforeseen. I don't think that anyone, even in NBA circles, saw this as of, June of last year. So, sometimes the unforeseen is going to happen, but with Bamba, I think some of the concerns are foreseen. We've talked about him a decent amount on this podcast. There are worries that he is just someone, as Cole said, that is along for the ride in basketball because he has such freaky dimensions. There are worries that his motor, because of that, is not going to run as high, but there are also valid explanations as to why that could be the case. Like, for instance, one valid explanation could be is because he is genuinely, and this is something that's been raised to me by a scout, is like, because he is so smart, and because he, is as thoughtful as he is, he may innately just understand the absurdity of college basketball, much in the way that Ben Simmons did defensively, right? Ben Simmons is now a very, very high-level defender for Philadelphia. It's very possible that once Mohamed Bamba gets to that level, is getting paid, and sees a potential for a 9-figure guarantee at some point in his career, that he could become the guy that we all think he can be. No one is saying by ranking him at number 7 that he can't be an all-star level player and become the defensive player of the year in the NBA. I think that's very much within the realm of his outcomes, but there's a lot more risk factor inserted within that.
And the analysis goes beyond just surface level. We know what he can do on the floor as a rim protector. His mobility is fantastic. He even shows some coordination flashes with the ball and straight line attacks. I don't think he's great there, but he at least has some ball handling coordination. It just, again, this is a lot harder than just what a guy is on the floor. It's more convoluted. It's more eccentric than that. You have to factor in the mentality. Like, when teams interview this guy, they're going to get probably some clarity. I know some already have. They've heard him talk. He's really eloquent. But specific questions are probably going to be beneficial to hear from him, and it just goes into how you value him and how you think he's going to progress as a person, because so much, again, of his upside, as it is with so many players, is tied to work ethic.
Yeah, like there are certainly NBA teams that have spoken with him. You know, for one, I can tell you, like, Luke Wynn did a big project on him at Sports Illustrated when he still worked there. Luke Wynn is now in the scouting department at Toronto. Like, they will have an understanding of what they're getting with Mohamed Bamba, I think. There are certainly other teams out there that will have an understanding of what they're getting with Mohamed Bamba. But the interview process for him, I would say, is probably going to be more important than for any other prospect in the top 14 of this class, right? Like, there's not really anyone else. I mean, maybe Deandre Ayton, because I don't think anyone really has a great feel for him yet in terms of his, mentality and in terms of his everything else that kind of surrounds him. But I do think that Mohamed Bamba, it's going to be essential for him to prove to NBA teams that he's in this for the long haul and that he is going to work his ass off to get to where he has to be.
Yeah, him and Ayton are the two swing guys in interviews. I think you just need to know more about the psyche. With Ayton, that's obviously critical as well, just because you have to assess ceiling with these guys. I mean, Ayton has a higher floor just because of his offensive coordination skill level, and Bamba has probably more variance, but there's a reason that a site like ESPN, when they released their mock draft today, had him number 3 ahead of even Bagley. Like, the upside is there. It's just how likely is it to actually materialize and manifest? Because that's the question we ultimately have to answer. It's not about just projecting outcome ranges. It's how likely are you to achieve that outcome?
Yep. Let's go ahead and move on. So let's talk about the Kentucky guys real quick, because Kevin Knox comes in at number 12. I was on a podcast earlier this week, I think it came out on Wednesday night maybe, with Joe Masato and Curtis Birch over at SEC Country. We talked a little bit about just all of the Kentucky guys and where they fall in the grand scheme of things. You know, they posed the question to me, how many players do I think will actually leave Kentucky this year? I said the over-under is probably 3.5. I said that Kevin Knox should probably go, just given where his stock is. Shea Alexander, it seems like, should probably go, just given where his stock is. And Hamidou Diallo, I think, is in a funky spot, because, as I mentioned, Keldon Johnson is coming in this next offseason and could very easily take Hamidou Diallo's spot next year, and that's a little bit of a scary thought for him, I think.
Yeah, and Diallo is kind of a flash guy, and he was going to get exposed at the college level, I think. Even last year when he was considering coming out, I even thought he should have done that then, just because when you put his skill level on a floor consistently, it starts to get picked apart, because he's an athlete first. He's a glider in transition. We see that in an open court setting, but as far as half court basketball, the skill level is just not there yet. And then when you start to really break this game down, how exactly does this guy translate? If he's not going to shoot the ball, really, what is he outside of maybe like a Corey Brewer type? Do you want that guy in the top 20? Maybe. So, yeah, Diallo has the most high variance to me. I think that Knox should definitely come out. I mean, you still have him 12th on your board. He's about that range in mine. I think there's a pretty established top 11. I tweeted that yesterday. Knox is just outside of that for me. I see the allure with him as maybe like an Otto Porter type at his ceiling outcome. He has not performed well, but in this draft, you look in that range with a lot of these other big guys, for example, in that range too. A team could be like, yeah, there's some upside there. I mean, he could be like a legitimate shooting type 4 in the NBA. So I would come out if I was Knox for sure. And Shea has been fantastic lately. If he can kind of keep this up, I think he should too.
Yeah, you know, I don't get into the game of like, is this guy going to declare? I don't know. Like, I can't tell you that. But, you know, just in terms of where their games are, I think that we can make a relative assessment on this, and just in terms of their situational stuff. None of these calls are easy, I guess is the way to put it, especially whenever you're Kevin Knox, or potentially being the 12th pick this year and having a relatively down recruiting class next year that you could somehow decide to, maybe go higher in next year's draft. But I don't know. We'll see. Let's talk about the guy that I mentioned at the top. I have Chandler Hutchison at number 14 right now. I think I'm higher than any NBA team on him. I think. Where do you think of Chandler Hutchison?
Well, last time we talked, remember, I was like, this is crazy to have him top 20. I ended up having him top 20, and then you ended up putting him at 14. And then ESPN comes out with their mock draft today and has him number 16.
Do they?
So I don't think it's crazy at all. So they moved him up 26 spots. So I think everybody's kind of catching on here. I mean, you were the first guy on him being like, this guy is a legit dude in like the top 35. And then we kept talking like, wait, why isn't he top 25? And then why isn't he top 20? And then here we are. He's like borderline lottery.
Yeah, you just get to the point with a lot of these guys where you're just like, okay, how do we take him over X? Like, how do you take Shea Alexander over him? How do you take Mitchell Robinson over him? How do you take Keita Bates-Diop over him, or Bruce Brown or Robert Williams over him? Especially, he's going to play a premium position in the NBA, one of value, one of need right now for just about everyone in the league. 6'7", 7-foot wingspan about. He is a really, really fluid athlete. He is a guy who is working on his jump shot, I think, more than has a consistent jump shot. The key for him, I think, is he needs to be able to shoot above the break threes. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it definitely helps. If you're just a corner three-point shooter, that limits your offense some. I'm not sure if he's ever going to shoot off movement, like a down screen action. That would be kind of interesting to see. If a team works him out, I would have him shoot a ton of those shots and just see what his footwork's like, how that shot translates to that kind of setting.
Yeah, one thing he has going for him, his assistant coach at Boise State is Phil Beckner. Phil Beckner is he was an assistant over at Weber State whenever Damian Lillard was there. Continued to work with Damian Lillard over the years, really helped him throughout the pre-draft process. And if you remember a little bit about Damian Lillard's pre-draft process, he shot up the boards, right? Like, no one thought he would go number 6 as a senior declaring for the draft whenever he ended his college basketball season. So I think that's one thing that he could have going for him. Hutchison's a really hard worker as well. I think he's going to continue to work on his game, work on his craft, and get to the point where he is able to really knock down shots from the wing. And if he can knock down shots above the break, his game is going to be so open in the NBA because he's so fluid athletically. He's a good ball handler. He's a pretty good passer. One thing that I think is worrisome, he actually has more turnovers than assists this year. For a guy who can actually really pass, that's a little bit scary. Like, he's asked to do a lot for Boise State, but there's not really a circumstance where I think that's an acceptable figure. You know what I mean?
It's never great to see, for sure, but I do think he shows enough in that role. And again, he has that higher usage. He's not going to have the same usage at the NBA. You're going to refine his role and make him more pigeonholed into a specific kind of style. I don't think he's going to be like a primary or even a secondary creator. It's going to be like, can you spot up, hit a three, and can you attack closeouts with those long strides, get to the basket with one dribble, finish there. And yeah, I think that what sold me on him more than anything was just the personality traits, the upward trajectory, like you noted. That is something that is important for a guy that's a senior. And you look at his freshman tape of him shooting, it's a train wreck. Like the strides he's made in his stroke are pretty phenomenal. And you see even improvements this year from him getting to the line more. You know, he's passing for others, creating for others. Like, he is making strides in his game that you can see manifest on stats as well. So he's getting better, and he plays a really coveted position in the NBA right now. So he's definitely in that teens mode for me, that giant tier along with a bunch of other bigs. You can make a case for him maybe even a little bit higher. I would still take Troy Brown, who you have number 13 ahead of him, just because of the age, and Troy has shown the proclivity to be a plus team defender. I'm not sure how good of a defensive player Hutchison is in a team construct, but he has the athleticism at least. So I don't think it's a bad ranking. I mean, I think he kind of came into it like this is going to be really high, but I think everybody's kind of catching up to this guy being a top 20 pick in this class.
Well, I think the thing is, too, like, I guess that I see him as a guy that in most drafts, I would feel great about getting him at 20. In this draft, though, like, I kind of feel that way about, like, Troy Brown, for instance, at number 13. I don't know if I feel great about taking Troy Brown at 13. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it, like we talked about, it kind of drops off a little bit after 11. Like, I'm not even crazy about taking Kevin Knox in the lottery right now. I mean, I can get the argument, but it's not something that I'm, like, really excited to do. There's just kind of this big tier after 11 that you can look at a bunch of different guys. I would have Mitchell Robinson more towards the higher end of that, but again, we haven't seen him play college basketball, so you can make a lot of different arguments for players in this range.
So where do you want to go next? Have you even seen the entirety of my board?
I've seen most of it. I can't name it off via memory. So talking points are good, but can we just we'll get to Melvin Frazier eventually, but that's another interesting guy that you said on Twitter that you would higher than a lot of other people. ESPN comes out with their mock, and he's 29th on their mock.
They have him 29th now?
Yes, they do.
Good for them, man. Schmitz and Gavoni do their work. I have them in the top 50. Yeah, I mean, I just don't know enough about his, like, personal traits, I guess. Like, he's a guy that I was super excited about coming into the year. Mentioned him very, very early in the year. If you go back through my Twitter feed, I really like his game. He was really just always kind of a jump shot away guy. Shot like 27% from three the first 2 years. He's at 41% from three right now. I think that's probably a little bit higher than what his actual skill set is. 74% from the line is a good sign. He brings the ball back a little bit too far toward his head on his jump shot, I think, and that's a little bit of a scary proposition. But killer defender, guy that, 3.5 assists a game, 6 rebounds a game, gets a little bit turnover prone with the ball, kind of like Hutchison does. But, if you're averaging 17, 6, and 3 a game, you're doing something right at Tulane. And, the quick twitch athleticism and the defensive ability is absolutely terrific for him. I'm a really big fan of what I've seen so far.
I watched the SMU game earlier today, and that was pretty impressive. I mean, I think at times he got maybe a little overrated in that matchup with Shake. I think that might have exposed Shake a little bit more as a primary creator type, but I did like his defense. I mean, he has that, like you noted, that quick twitch athleticism. He has that speed, the agility. He doesn't have the strength. He gets run through pretty easily. And the jump shot, I echo exactly what you said about the shooting motion. He has some really bad misses. Like, even in that SMU game, he had a really bad air ball. I just don't see a lot of control with him bringing the ball back. I don't think the 41% or 43% he is from three is indicative of what he's going to be at the next level. But he's definitely under consideration as a first-round guy. If you believe in his shot, at least mechanically, foundationally, and you can build upon that, he definitely has the athleticism, the size, the length that you look for in that range with some ball skills as well. So I think he's definitely a legit prospect to me.
I'm surprised that ESPN has him that high. Now that I think about it, they're very, very good. Trust me, like, I think that they do a great job. I'm surprised that he's that high, because, like, even being as high as I am on him, like, and even knowing that he plays a premium position, the shot scares me enough on the small sample to where it's hard for me to put him in the first round right now,
Especially before we know who declares or not. I think eventually he could get there for me, and that's kind of what I was insinuating when I said maybe a first-round pick. Like, it depends on who else declares. I'm a little bit more hesitant like you are, but I don't know. I mean, they had Daniel Gafford, I think, at 35 for a while, and they were really high on him, and they just bumped him up to 17. So maybe they've seen enough to where they can make that leap.
Yeah, no, I think that they're very, very good at what they do, like I said. Yeah, I had Daniel Gafford at 16. Do we want to talk about Daniel Gafford at all?
Have you given your thoughts on him on the podcast yet? I can't remember if that was just solely off air where we talked about him.
I think we probably have talked about him on the podcast. I mean, he's a guy that is quickly rising up boards for NBA teams. 6'10", 7'2" wingspan. Really good hands, good rebounder on a per minute basis, good finisher inside, really good rim runner. Has touch around the basket, but like also kind of a weird. Does it look like he has really big hands and like kind of like just throws the ball in sometimes to you?
Yeah, I mean, he dunks everything. What's his finishing numbers are absurd this year just because he usually dunks. I can't remember a lot of touched finishes, but you do see some coordination. He had a couple really awesome plays earlier in the year where he was attacking like space. He can do that off one or two dribbles. He even avoided a charge, showing that coordination to kind of jump to the side. But yeah, he's a real dude. Like, I think he's a legit top 20 guy.
Yeah, the other thing with him is too, he's a little bit heavy-footed, but he takes pride in his defense. Like, he is a person that will, get his hands up and really like get them in your face and try and disrupt you. And he really wants to come over and protect the rim and block shots. He doesn't want anything to go in the basket when he's around and when he's on the floor. In terms of Arkansas's defense, and given the fact that he only plays like 22 minutes a game, there actually is a pretty decent sample size on both sides of the spectrum. Arkansas's defense, they give up 99 points per 100 possessions when he's on the floor. They give up 110 points per 100 possessions when he's off the floor. That's per hoop lens. So he's making a very clear impact defensively. He's a good rim runner that's an athlete offensively. He seems to understand his role as well in a pretty significant way. So I agree with you. I think he's a top 20 guy.
I really like his motor. He just competes all the time. He, like you said, he can test shots. He's not the best laterally, but I think a lot of that's like he doesn't have super choppy steps. He's more of a glider. When he can turn and run, he can really mirror guys like on drives. He'll have these chase down blocks because of the effort level and just the speed when he can flip his hips and run. So, yeah, he has a really projectable role as far as his fit in the NBA, especially in like a spread pick and roll kind of system. I just don't know if he quite has the measurables, the girth, the size, just to be an overwhelming presence at the 5 as a starter. But I think he does have a starting caliber ceiling. I just think he's more probably of a third big right now, if I was to project him with any kind of confidence. But he definitely has the upside athletically. If he continues to add to his game, he's shown passing flashes even. Like, he's been pretty good passer this year from what I've seen. Like, he make pretty decently quick reads out of the post. So if he can kind of put all that together and be like a short roll playmaker in like the Clint Capella mold or something, I can see some starting equity for him.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Let's go on ahead and talk real quick about Killian Tillie. I have Tillie at number 26. The more I think about this, the more I do think I'm a little bit high on him. But what are your thoughts on Tillie? Because I think that you also like him.
I really like the player. I just IQ-wise, he knows where to be defensively. He's got great feet despite playing super high on the perimeter. I just can't really think of a situation where I've seen someone, a big like him, who moves as well as he does laterally, that plays so upright. But it works for him. It's just when you think about him and projecting him into the NBA, he's probably going to have to be a 4 unless he's like a backup 5 in like small ball lineups. And wouldn't you just rather play like a combo wing type instead of him that has maybe a little bit better agility with the ball, is a little bit better defensively? So I don't know. It's tough because I feel like he is an archetype that is kind of getting faded out of the league as this kind of maybe straight line 4. But he brings enough defensive versatility via his IQ and his feet that I don't think he's going to be a negative. So I like him. I have him as a first-round guy.
Yeah, like, it's really hard because he has to be able to shoot the ball. Like, there's not really an if, and, or but about it. Like, if he can't shoot, he's not an NBA prospect to me. The good thing is, you know, he's hitting 36% this year from 3, something like that. He's taking over 2 a game. He is actually a pretty good shooter, I think. He's hitting like 82% of his free throws as well. Like, he's a very, very good, very, very good shooter, in my opinion. He's a 62.5 true shooting percentage. He understands his role. You need to be able to steal some minutes with him at the 5, though, I think. Do you think you can do that with him?
I think certain matchups you'll be fine with that, but it's going to be a pretty specific setting. Like against a super physical guy is going to struggle. So yeah, I think that's going to be more of a limited deal. But with how the league is downsized, there's going to be lineups that arise that you just play, 5 smalls essentially, and he's more of like a wing than I think he is a true 5. Honestly, it's just overall approach. But where would you have him in compared to someone like TJ Leaf last year? Because at least with Tillie, I feel like he can survive on the perimeter defensively. Man. So like that's an interesting question for me because I feel like both of those guys are ideally stretch 4 types who can play make maybe a little bit. They have good feel, but it's a position that's kind of just getting played out of the league right now.
Oh man, that's tough. I've not thought about this weirdly. I would say that even though Leaf hit a higher percentage of his threes, I think I trust Tillie's mechanics a little bit more from 3.
That's fair.
He's certainly a much better defender. Like, Tillie leaps and bounds better as a defensive basketball player than TJ Leaf. But TJ was a lot more comfortable putting the ball on the deck and creating and being able to, like, really attack closeouts on the move. And he could knock down shots in the post off of mismatches. Like, they both have real positives and negatives. I think that I would probably take Tillie just because of the defense, but I don't know. That's hard. That's really, really hard.
Yeah, I would definitely take Tillie for what it's worth. Because of the defense. That's why I like him as a prospect. If he couldn't defend, if he couldn't move in space and didn't have the IQ that he does, I wouldn't be that interested in him, to be honest, even with his shooting mechanics. But when you combine those 2 elements, he can play both sides of the floor relatively well. I think he'll have value in certain matchups for sure.
His per 40-minute numbers, just to kind of show the versatility that he has. 19 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 steals, 2 blocks. Giving that production across the board is very rare from a prospect, especially one who also adds a lot of positional defensive equity as well as a person who can really, sit down and defend on the perimeter. A lot of his stuff doesn't show up on the box score, I don't think.
I agree with that.
Well, is there any other standout? I mean, Jontay Porter might be interesting. You're higher on Jontay Porter than I am. You have him as a first-round pick, right?
I do.
So I'm not that high on him, so go ahead.
No, I love the IQ for his age. I think he's really smart. You can see that when you turn on a game for 5 seconds. It's evident he knows where to be defensively. His team defense has been pretty phenomenal from what I've seen. I like the shooting mechanics a lot. Maybe he's not the most consistent shooter yet, but he has one of my favorite shooting mechanics of any big in the class. His passing, he moves the ball quickly. He seems to understand where everybody is on the floor, even moves well without the ball. So I just look at a guy that's the youngest guy in this class, and I know he doesn't have the athletic upside. He doesn't have imposing size. He gets jumped over and leaped over when he tries to box guys out, but at least he tries to box guys out. So I see him as more of a situational big, honestly, but in this class, in that late teens range, I think that's a fine spot for him. He's going to have value, I think, in a certain levels of play, and he might have some physical upside as far as body development being so young. But yeah, the athletic limitations are probably going to keep him off of most starting rosters, and I think that's probably what you feel too.
Phenomenal defense to me is a little bit of a stretch.
team defense, as far as awareness. I don't think he's like a phenomenal defender by any means. I just think he's, as far as IQ for his age and being a big, I think he's pretty phenomenal there.
Yeah, I can see that. He knows where to be. He's very, very smart. The physical tools scare me a lot. Like, yes. He's 6'10" with a 7-foot wingspan, and he's very heavy-footed. Like, he's not an explosive dude. And that scares me on defense out in space, but it scares me on offense a lot too. Like, that lack of explosiveness. He's only at like 46% from 2-point range this year. Like, he is not this awesome interior finisher yet. The mechanics are fine. Like, he's shooting 33% from 3. I think I think he can shoot, but I'm a little bit more worried about him being able to score on the interior. Like, he has a 54 true shooting percentage right now. That's not good.
Oh, he's a stretch guy for sure. I mean, he's been more perimeter-oriented this entire season, but he does show good footwork on pick and pops. I think you can utilize him that way. He has enough skill in the post where he can post a mismatch if you get like a smaller guard on him, but you're never going to run your offense through him as a scorer inside. I think he can definitely pass out of the post. Whether you would ever double him is a different question entirely. I just see rare traits for a guy his age, and I don't think they translate necessarily to like being an impactful starter. But I think team defense overall is probably an underrated concept and one that's hard to measure in college, and I think that he has that. So for me, if he can bring that to the game and he can stretch the floor, he can pass, I think that's a quality player.
Yeah, I think that everything you're saying is right in theory. I'm just not sure I believe in the athletic tools yet to where I feel comfortable with him. Let's see. There are a couple other random guys I feel like are worth mentioning here. Landry Shamet is a guy that I get a decent amount of questions on, weirdly. I like Landry Shamet a lot because he's shooting 50% from 3. Like, there's just kind of not... Like, if you're going to defend and shoot 50% from 3, there's a place for you.
Pretty much. I mean, I posted a list on Twitter, and he was the best jump shooter in college basketball, 2 weeks ago or something? Minimum 75 attempts. So the guy can shoot the living hell out of the ball. The trajectory is it's a little bit of an issue for me as far as it comes out real flat. He shoots some like really flat balls sometimes on a tight rope, and I want to see him shoot in an NBA setting, so from the NBA 3 line. But he is, he does defend. He has good feet. He's not going to be a plus defender because he's not that strong. You rarely see guys that are 6'4" and aren't built and don't have that like consistent aggression like a Tony Allen type, being an elite defensive player, of course. But if you play a little bit of both sides of the ball and you can really utilize his shooting off motion, which he's tremendous at, he can shoot from every different angle, off the dribble going either direction, off screens going either direction. You kind of put him in a motion scheme. I see an argument for him in the first round. Honestly, I think that he is that caliber of shooter, and when you get down in that range, there's not a lot of shooters like him who also defend at a respectable level.
I'm going to give you a chance to talk about Terrence Davis because I know that you wrote about Terrence Davis. Did that go live today?
I did it. I think I published it yesterday.
Okay. So give me your Terrence Davis pitch because I have him at number 55. I think you're a little bit higher, but we're not like out of the ballpark either.
Yeah, I think the talent is there. It's just the consistency and just the general wildness of how he looks on the floor sometimes. I mean, he's fun as hell in transition. You can see that dynamic speed. He just gets to another gear. He's a really good athlete, like first step wise, as far as attacking closeouts. I think he's got a first step even in an isolation setting to be okay there. Decent finisher, and it just comes down to the shooting for him, honestly. And he shows the numbers aren't like super high on him. But if you watch him via tape, like he'll come off screens, he'll come off these pin down curl sets and set his feet quickly and shoot. He can shoot a little bit off motion as well, like sprints to the corner, sets his feet quickly. He had that breakout game recently against Arkansas where he really showcased all of that offensive ability, and he has the frame to defend. He has that kind of stronger build at 210 pounds or 208 pounds, wherever he weighs. So I just think in that range, like as a second-round guy, you rarely find guys that have first-round athleticism that have a projectable jump shot and like first step and all of that. So he kind of checks a lot of boxes, but he's riskier. I think that's why you probably have him 55 is he's inconsistent, and you can't really bank on him being like a consistent. He's not going to be like a Jalen Brunson kind of consistent, but the upside is probably higher.
Yeah, consistency is a really big thing for me. I really like guys who can be trustworthy night in, night out. A lot of players show flashes. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
PJ Washington shows flashes. I mean, not to just continue on Kentucky, but like Wenyen Gabriel and Nick Richards, like that entire Kentucky team is a team of flashes, right? Shamori Pons is a flash guy, right? He shows like moments where you're like, how the fuck are NBA guys going to be able to stay in front of this dude? He's also shooting 22% from three, but like there are moments where you're just like, holy hell, like this guy's real. And I think that's probably where like I'm not super high on, for instance, like Jontay Porter, right? Like over his last, like 10 or 11 games, he has 3 games in double digits and 3 games with 0 points, right? Like something like that. And with Terrence Davis, it's not as exaggerated, but he is a guy that, on a night in, night out basis isn't bringing it at the same level. Like he's, like there are days where he, I believe, like doesn't start for Ole Miss, right? Like he's been in and out of their starting lineup all year. He had a stretch of games against South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi State, including 2 home games where he combined for 10 points in those 3 games. Then over his last 5 games, he's gone for 13, 8, 12, 30, and 15. So I'm big on consistency. I want guys who I know I can trust night in, night out. I would like for Terrence Davis to continue to bring that consistency up to the forefront.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to philosophy. It's just having a preference. And if you have a guy that has a ceiling outcome, maybe as a 5th starter for Davis, he has athleticism to survive on an NBA floor. I'm pretty confident of that. But the consistency as far as mental approach isn't there. He's a talent upside play. In the second round, I just feel like he's one of the better ones, in my opinion, that looks to have like a projectable role that's valuable at the next level.
One guy I want to talk about is Matisse Thybulle. I have him in the top 70 right now. Despite the fact that he's shooting 29% from 3, I think that kind of shows how, potentially rare his defensive instincts are. No one since I think like 2001 in college basketball has had over a 5% steal rate and a 5% block rate. That comes courtesy of Ken Pomeroy. Right now he's above both those thresholds, and we're midway through conference season. That's insane to me.
He's got great off-ball instincts. I mean, I know UW plays a lot of 2-3 zone, but he seems to have a good feel for creating events. It's funny that you noted the 3-point percentage, because I think that was up at like mid-40s earlier this year, and I've always thought that he's more of a streak shooter. I saw him a lot last year with Fultz there, so I was like, he's interesting. I think he has a 7-foot wingspan, so he's long and he has instincts defensively. It's just the shot has always been kind of touch and go for me. It's not consistent enough, and without the shot, I don't know if he's good enough defensively to be like an NBA rotation player.
All right, if you by chance have this, do you have my top 100 up on your page right now? Okay, so we're going to do a game here to finish up on. I'm going to send you the link in a text message. Do you have The Athletic, by the way? I don't even know.
I did. I do not have it anymore.
Okay, let's do it this way then. We're going to play a game where I ask you, and I'm going to do it myself as well, what player did I fuck up the most on? Like, what player is either way too high or way too low on this board?
Interesting.
To where I have made what could be a calculated error. So I'm going to send you the top 90 guys basically here in a text message. And while you're looking through it, I will give you my answer on this. So my answer, I've talked about Killian Tillie already. I think Tillie, I probably have a few spots too high. I think the more I think about his game, the more I think I might have Vince Edwards a little bit too low. I have Vince Edwards at number 53. He's a 6'8" forward with a 7-foot wingspan who can really defend, who has averaged about 17.7 rebounds, 4 assists over the course of his last 10 games or so on that Purdue team that is just hot as all hell right now. He's been a consistent 40% 3-point shooter over the course of the last couple of years. The only thing he really can't do that scares me is I don't know if he can consistently put the ball on the deck and attack closeouts. But I look at every single other factor of his game, and I think that guy screams NBA role player. Is there someone, how do you feel about Vince Edwards before I ask you from who you believe I am too high on or too low on?
Maybe I'm just a little surprised just because he seems like a more consistent, established commodity, right? I think that his bugaboo and his issue is you just don't see a lot of upside with him. It's Vince Edwards. But he does enough things well consistently, I think, to be a role player. He has that in his package. I don't know if it's necessarily too low, honestly, but from what I know about you and how you rank guys, I would probably expect him a little bit higher.
I think that he's probably 10 spots too low on my board. Okay. Something like that. Maybe there are more egregious errors, when you get down below, I have Kendrick Nunn at 94. You could make an argument for Kendrick Nunn being 30 spots higher if you believe in him as a human being. I've seen some of the reporting that's been out there. Shannon Ryan in the Chicago Tribune did a really good thing on Kendrick Nunn, and I was concerned about the lack of understanding of why he got dismissed from Illinois with domestic assault charges that were placed at his feet. So that kind of stuff scares me on guys. Is there someone who stands out to you on the batch that I sent you that should be too high or is too low?
I think the guy, we actually talked about this last night via text, is Josh Reeves to me.
You love Josh Reeves.
I do like him a lot. I think the athleticism, the instincts and stuff, he just has rare instincts that I don't think you can teach. And if he shoots a 3, I think he can have a role in the NBA. I think he's a legit good defender. So I think that I would have him in the second round range, honestly. And the other guy that we both like, I just am higher on, is Gary Clark. So not seeing him, but I don't think these are obviously deal breakers for a board. Most people
It's funny. I sent you the top 88. I have Gary Clark at 89.
That's pretty fantastic. Honestly, I don't disagree with a lot of what you have as far as, obviously we already talked about Jontay. I think he's probably too low in my opinion. Chris Wilkes is someone kind of under the radar now, I think, after the beginning of the season. What have you seen from him to have him at 43rd?
So I trust the jump shot. He's 6'7" with a 6'11" wingspan. So he has the size to play at the next level, I think. He's been a lot more consistent. So I have Chris Wilkes ahead of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, right? That's probably a standout thing for people right now, would you say?
Probably, yeah. I think Nickeil, his reputation might exceed his current play. He got a couple of endorsements coming into the year that put him on guys' radar as possibly this lead guard type. So I think once people come down from that, I don't know if that's as shocking, but probably from your casual observer, that might stand out.
So Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Virginia Tech played Kentucky in their second to last non-conference game. Chris Wilkes played Kentucky in their last non-conference game. So this is a sample of 10 games for Nickeil Alexander-Walker, a sample of 9 games against Chris Wilkes, against the most consistent stretch of competition that they have played all season, right? Nickeil Alexander-Walker, in all of ACC play and in their game against Kentucky and Presbyterian, is averaging 8 points on 39% from the field and 25% from 3. And he regularly does not close games for them because of his defense. He sometimes does, sometimes doesn't. It's like a 50-50 proposition if he's going to close.
Yeah.
That that screams to me that he's not ready for the next level, and I would be worried that he would get lost in the shuffle, right? One thing that I talked about with Pete Philo last week on the podcast was, he's a strong believer in the best way to develop a player is to play consistent minutes at the highest possible level you can play at. And I don't think that Nickeil is going to get consistent minutes at the NBA level right now. Like, I think that G League players would cause him issues because of his lack of physical strength right now.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm on board. I think that makes a lot of sense.
So with Chris Wilkes, though, Chris Wilkes over his last 9 games, 16 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 turnover, 1 steal, shooting 49, 39, 72 from the field. That's really good. Like that, he's a really good basketball player, I think.
Yeah, so just going through a couple more of these guys. Dre Foster obviously suffered that season-ending injury.
Yeah.
Would you have had him higher if he wasn't injured, or are you factoring that into your analysis?
Probably 5 or 6 spots. I didn't have him the first round whenever he got hurt. I probably would have had him like 37 or so, like right around where I have Devontae Graham right now. Maybe a little bit higher than Devontae, maybe 36. Where I'd have had him probably ahead of Javon Carter.
Gotcha. And then with, let's see, D'Anthony Melton. I know this is a case of we just don't know. But so you feel like right now he's a first-round guy still based on what you've seen his freshman year. If he would have played this year, let's say he improves his jump shot, and he would have played this year, where would you have him ranked if he did that?
Oh, God. If you what does improve? Like, if you told me he was shooting 40% from 3, I would have him, like, in the lottery. If you told me he was shooting 37% on limited attempts, I might have him 10 spots higher than this. Like, there's not a crazy amount of difference between him and Bruce Brown, except D'Anthony's 2 years younger, right? And, like, D'Anthony's just less athletic.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I was just curious. I have him still as a top 20 guy. I just can't move off of it watching his freshman tape. But, yeah, if he shows any kind of shooting progression, like in workouts, if he decides to declare, not necessarily declare for the draft, but go through that whole process, and it gets leaked that like he's shooting the hell out of the ball in workouts, he's tweaked his form a little bit because he has problems keeping his elbow in. So if he does that, I think that he's another one of those high instincts guys for how young he is. Defensively can have like a really dynamic team defense effect on teams. Yeah,
I think I agree with you. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
No, honestly, like I'm pretty in line with all of these rankings for the most part. We've talked about guys. I mean, guys know who we disagree on for the most part. So that's outside of that. Actually, one guy, Lonnie Walker. Did you watch that game last night?
I have not watched that tape yet. I will probably get to it tomorrow morning.
I caught a little bit of it, but yeah, really impressive for him. He's been kind of the swing guy for me. I think where you have him is completely realistic. Honestly, it's a fair ranking. But if he continues to show,
for what it's worth, that's 24 for people.
Oh, yeah. So if he would have showed more consistency, I think you can bump him up in this class, maybe like another 8-9 spots, honestly. I think that the talent is there. It's just putting that together, the consistency, and having the production to match that talent.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy who had an abbreviated preseason due to knee surgery. Who knows how much the knee surgery was playing a factor early on in his season. Obviously, he was coming off the bench, playing limited minutes early on. He's certainly coming on of late, though, and I'm very interested to see what he can do later in the year, because you're right. He's a guy that I think could really, really improve his stock to where he makes this a deeper draft. Like he is one of like maybe 3 or 4 guys where if you told me I have him ranked over Kevin Knox at number 12 at the end of the year, I would not be shocked.
I'm with you. I think he has that kind of upside translating to the NBA. You can really easily find a role for him with his ability to defend in space, kind of switch. And then we've talked about his compact mechanics in the past. There's a really projectable role for him if he starts producing more consistently and earning the coach's trust more consistently. Yeah, no, I think I'm with you there. Cole, tell the people where you work, where you write, where you podcast, everything like that. I'm not going to tell you where I live, but if you want to check out the work I do, thestepin.com as usual. Sam already referenced Terrence Davis. I just wrote a piece on him, just about his first-round potential and how that he kind of fits a projectable role in the NBA. So check that out. I also do the Ode to Odin NBA Draft podcast once a week. Check that as well, and continue to tune to this podcast. Thanks a lot, guys. Please go subscribe to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. You guys did a great job of doing that, though.
over the last little while here. I had a very, very nice week of subscriptions. So thank you all for paying attention to the work I do over there. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. It really helps us move up in the ratings, and the more we move up in the ratings, the more it gets out to the masses and the more people see the podcast. So that's about all I got for you. Until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.